Welcome to Past Your Bedtime. My name's Bev. Before we begin, I want to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Produce and Provide Limited. Produce and Provide was set up by food and farming champion Neil Darwent. His first-hand experience of running farms in the UK for over 30 years has led him to embark on a mission to restoring the true value of traditional family farms and the food they produce. BBC Food and Farming Awards winner in 2014 and Nuffield Farming Scholar, Neil is passionate about winning producers the recognition and the reward that they deserve and helping UK consumers to make better choices about the food they buy. Find out how you can make a difference by visiting their website produceandprovide.co.uk and across social media. I started speaking to Neil sometime last year and he's pretty much on my speed dial now for any and all of my questions surrounding food and farming and an awful lot about dairy. So it was only natural to invite Neil along to the podcast to explain more about the work that he's been doing and to hear his passion for the subject. With the need for collaboration across the food and farming sector highlighted in the government's recent profitability review, Neil embodies what it means to work together, communicating and sharing his huge experience, but more than that, turning words into actions. Typically, I'm catching up with him on a really busy day where the internet connection is a bit crumbly at times, but having played meeting ping pong with him for a few weeks, I really didn't want to miss the opportunity. So here we are, as usual, starting at the beginning. Lovely to see you again and Happy New Year, and if we can still say that at this point. Neil, I think it would be really useful for the listeners to understand a bit about your background. I know what you're up to at the moment, but I'm interested way back when you were at Harper Adams University. Where did it all go from there, and why was agriculture in your career path at that point?
Yeah, well, I suppose Harper and farming were in my blood from the early days. My mother's family are dairy farmers in Gloucestershire, and my love of farming started a long time before I went to Harper. But I actually was not exactly an A-star student at Harper. I got myself a HND, and then I thought some were going off traveling the world and driving combines in Australia and something. And I thought, I don't know, I need to earn some money. So I went off milking cows in Buckinghamshire for a bit. And it was a tiring time, I was a living single young man, living on my own, working all hours, cooking for myself and things like that. So, and I continued to milk cows for a period of probably, almost 8 years, really, not really being that sort of ambitious. But I found myself around about 1990, a job came up in Sussex for what was then a job running a herd of cows on the highest indexing Holstein herd in the UK. And I was really getting into kind of genetics and cow potential. And I'd read the sort of CMEX catalogs and things like that and really see what the Canadians were doing, the Americans. And I kind of had an interest as well at that time in business management. Although we'd done sort of farm management at Harper, I went and did a business studies A-level at night school when I was down in Sussex. And the person who ran it used to say to me, Neil, why do you bother coming? Because you're asleep most of the time. And but I got myself a B at A-level, which I was really quite chuffed about. And I absolutely loved it. And I began to sort of think more about farm management. And I wrote an application for a job at a farm business down in North Devon, which was a 2,500 acre mixed estate with 3 dairy herds. And I went along. It was properly recruited by a consultancy company. Had a very nice evening in a hotel with partners and met all the people and went round the farms the next day. And I said to my wife, this is great. This is really lovely, but I'm younger than everyone else. And I don't think I've got a cat in hell's chance. And blow me, they rang me back and said, look, the owner really would like to work with you. How about it? Would you come and do this? So I got a real break from milking cows to suddenly managing a 2,500 acre mixed farm business, which was incredible. And I ended up down there in about 1996, just really as BSc was kind of, there was this sort of whole load of stuff going on around at that time, and we cleared lots of cows and things like that. So And that, of course, then enhanced my interest in farming management even more, being right there in this sort of melting pot of a farm business that evolved around a poultry unit, actually, or poultry, a big egg production business. And
Yeah.
that had 3 dairy farms and sheep and beef and everything else. And so I kind of also at that time was moving in quite interesting circles with farm discussion groups and things like that, and being courted by obviously suppliers and people because we were quite a big business. And I learned from that. The people I'd worked for previously in Sussex, father and son, had both been Nuffield farming scholars.
Uh-huh.
And after running this business for a year or two in Devon, we were like a conglomeration of little family farms dotted around the district, really. And I thought,
Mm.
how on earth as a business do we achieve economies of scale? Because we're big, and people used to say to me in the market in down in the town, it's all right for you, you're big. And I say,
Hmm.
but we're not. We're running the roads with tractors. Guys are going to have to feed cattle every morning on a farm, 3 miles over there, and
Really inefficient.
really inefficient. Yeah,
Mm.
and we were really struggling to kind of make that gel as a business. We had our own silage making team, and we did we went around some things like that kind of worked well. But so I suddenly I thought, do you know what? I wonder if I could get a Nuffield farming scholarship. And at that time, I had actually, one of the semen companies offered me a free trip to Canada to see some of the breeding herds out there and the studs. And it was 5 days out near Vancouver in Fraser Valley, which was absolutely fantastic and beautiful part of
Yeah.
the world. We got to go to Vancouver Island at the time. And on the last day, the guy said, who led the tour, said, we're going to do something different. We're going to cross over into Washington State and go and see one of these big American dairies. And we
Uh-huh.
went to a farm that had 2,000 cows all under one roof. And they had a resident vet. The one guy would feed the milking cattle through the day. Someone else would come on a night shift and feed the young stock with the same machine. And I just thought, there it is. There's the answer. This is what economies of scale are all about, in dairy farming. And so with that, I applied for a Nuffield farming scholarship, and I was so passionate about this. I got it. I was absolutely blown away that I got this scholarship. And this is going back 25 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I chose to travel. I spent a month in South Australia and Victoria and Tasmania looking at low input dairy systems there, and contrasted that with then going to the US and touring quite sort of extensively from Wisconsin across to California. I had a month in each. My son was born, our first son, our only son, was born 5 days after I got back from Australia. He came a bit early. And then the following March, I said to my wife, I've now got to go to America for a month. And bless her. So disappeared. And it was life changing, to be honest. It was
Yeah.
just, I met so many inspiring people. And I would say that was, yeah, it just then was the foundation for everything I've done since then, I have to say, really.
Yeah.
So the fascination of seeing these guys going to Australia and seeing somebody milk 1,500 cows on a rotary platform with 115 stalls on it, one tractor, no buildings otherwise, just a parlour and pivot irrigators to grow the grass, and then calves reared in paddocks. As soon as they were weaned, they were turned out. They were just had straw bales for shelters in case there was any wind and rain. I thought that's what real low cost dairy farming means. I think in the UK at the time, a lot of people were thinking about more sort of maybe spring block calving things, but we tended to think of the sort of the more simple regimes as people who perhaps milked 120 black and white cows doing about 6,000 litres and fed them round bale silage or self-feed silage, and they were the low cost guys. But suddenly realised what it really meant, and so that was kind of, I guess, a lot of what I took away from there. And then compare and contrast with California, where I went to farms there milking 5,000 cows and doing all sorts of things, to kind of drive yields. It was yield, and 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, cows indoors. Yeah, incredible systems in terms of management,
Yeah.
and a very different thing. So
First,
that's a short run through, really. No, actually, I have to finish by saying, so I came back from having learned all about economies of scale, but this is a key bit, really. I came back from that, and I saw a job come up in Somerset for a chap who it was not a farmer. He had farming links, but he had a very successful business in Bristol and Bath. And he always had a farm, and he also had his milk bottled in Bristol and sold to schools and local shops. And he was growing this business by renting farms on 5-year FBTs at the time. And a job came up for farms director. And I kind of wanted to move back this way with my wife and I a bit for family reasons and stuff from North Devon. And so I said, I'm going to apply. And I just ticked all the boxes because of my Nuffield I'd done recently and all these things. And I got the job to come and manage a business that ended up with about 3,000 cows over 4,500 acres, but in 13 separate farms, about 45 miles sort of east to west. So anything but economies of scale again, really. And that was absolutely, it was fascinating. And the guy who owned it was a really gregarious guy and really good fun to work for. And
But could you apply what you'd seen to those various situations with across the 13 units? I mean, how much of it translated into what you could do to develop the efficiency?
So really, yeah, it was trying to, there were things, certainly the things I learned from the States a lot were around sort of protocols, so having ways of doing things, having everybody understanding what was required when a cow got mastitis or whatever it was, what was the protocol? How do we address this? And so certainly a lot of things like that as well. I was always and still like to think I am a very people focused person. I've been there. I've been just some bloke who milks cows, and the lack of value that I feel is placed in those skills because they don't involve having a degree. They don't involve doing anything particularly scientific. And I've always been keen to promote a better understanding of what people do on farms, the people that get their hands dirty. So I kind of organized regular team meetings, things like that. I was always very keen to get people together. The business itself was difficult, though. In that 15-year period that I ran that business, we went through the whole kind of milk quota thing, and quota prices were 50p a litre, and it was milk prices were 18p a litre at time. It was a really, really tough time. And we weren't, to some extent, we could gain economies of scale, again, bit with machinery and things, between farms, but it was difficult. And again, at the end of all this journey, it's all been about constantly running faster to stand still, which is where so many farmers find themselves today. And my change came in that business because I got fed up that the only option appeared to be was to milk more cows and produce more milk if we wanted to survive. And it just was putting pressure on cows, it was putting pressure on resources, it was putting pressure on people, and it was no fun for anybody. And the only little thing that kind of gave me I'd hate it'd be too clever to say I had an epiphany, but within this business, we had 3 herds of Montbéliard cows, which had been imported from France. They originate really from the Jura Mountains on the French sort of Swiss border.
Yeah.
And having been a big sort of Holstein man and chasing high yields, when I got there, out of these 13 herds, I thought, why have we got 3 herds of these fat, lazy red and white things that don't give any milk? It's that. And then I went to France to some shows when we'd buy cows in France, and I went quite a lot to the Jura. And the guys there were generally small farmers in that region, but they would have sort of cooperatives making cheeses like Reblochon and Montdor.
They make Comte.
Beautiful,
my
favorite cheese, yeah. And also the beef calves from those dual purpose, robust kind of breeds were worth a lot of money in the market. The cold cows were worth a lot. The cows lived a long time. They were very fertile. The conception rates were great when we were breeding cows. And I began to think, actually, do you know what? Sometimes it's not about farming for volume, it's about farming for value. And that suddenly put a whole new train of thought in my head about, why are we relentlessly driven by volume? We should be driven by value. And so I could see the value the French were extracting from these small numbers of fairly low milk yielding cows. And that led me on a whole new journey, to be honest. So that's kind of something that followed from my hands-on farming.
That's fascinating. And I don't know much about cows or dairy or cheese making, but for you to hit on the Jura Mountains and the cheese production there. Yeah, very happy time I spent out there with a friend exploring that area.
Yeah.
What comes out loud and clear from what you've explained is a little self-deprecating, but there are times in your career when you've doubted yourself, but just gone for it anyway,
Yeah.
and surprised yourself, or maybe not surprised others, but that you've had the tenacity to put yourself up for something and go
Yeah.
for it and then get it done. Where you led on to, and it was an epiphany of sorts, really, is that what we see today with Produce and Provide, the business that you've set up?
Yes, that's been kind of a journey over the last, I think now, so 10, 11 years. Yeah, I've been on this journey about trying to realize the value in the farming behind our food. For too long, I've been frustrated by the fact that people will be easily swayed by labels. They'll be swayed by things like images of dairy cows in fields in the dairy aisles and things without really understanding what's going on. And I think it's wrong, but my biggest concern was it was just denying farmers the recognition and reward they deserved. And so that's a phrase I use a lot now. Is my role in my work is very much about winning farmers the recognition and reward they deserve, and also empowering consumers to make a more informed choice so they can understand. It's all very well having a Union Jack on something and saying it's British. That's good. That's a good place to start. Tells you nothing about how that food was produced. So for me, it's about the how as much as the where, and that's what Produce and Provide is about. And my previous, prior to that, my own free range milk label was about that sort of thing. And so I continue to bang the drum about these things.
Do you get the impression that the time is now? I certainly feel like, obviously for me through last year, it's been a journey of discovery, and the media narrative about farming has focused on the policy and government. But through that process, I think what's come about is more public awareness from people from outside of agriculture, like myself, just having a renewed awareness of actually what we should be thinking about in terms of food production. And as you say, value in what we're consuming or producing, rather than it being about production volumes and scale. So tell us more about what the Produce and Provide website is about and how that's constructed and what it is today.
Yeah, I'll do that. But if I may, I'll just pick up on what you said there, because you touched on some points that are really important to me. And I do, first and foremost, I do think the time is now. I think there is an incredible opportunity to engage people right now. A lot of that has come on the back, obviously, bad news stories around farming and debates around things like inheritance tax, the drought, the struggles a lot of farmers are having this winter, of course, because they're low on forage stocks.
Yeah.
But, the protests in London that we've seen, the effort and the lengths that farmers have gone to get there and make their case heard has been inspiring. It's caught a lot of attention. Yes, some people are critical and you'll always get your bashers, but I am stunned, quite frankly, by the amount of positive support we're seeing through Produce and Provide for farmers. And so my role in Produce and Provide is I will touch on things that I think are wrong, and I will write posts about what's going against farmers at the moment and what's wrong with this. But very much our role is to focus on the positive promotion of all that's great about British farming and food. And the time is now. We have I started the website in 2020 as a bit of a hobby. I was working, running a farm business in the south of Bristol at the time. And from my previous experience with free range milk, where I ran a CIC and I had a logo, a pasture promise logo for milk from cows grazed a minimum of 6 months a year, which went well for a period, was done in a bit by COVID for various reasons. And I learned from that although we had a great brand and we had a lot of public response, we still met barriers in the supply chain to getting that product to market. There were people crying out after I was on television, saying, where can I buy it? Where can I buy it? So I began to think about the only route really that you can have complete control of this whole process is if actually you are the producer and the seller, or the provider, as I call it, producer. So that's where the name produce and provide came from. And I built a self-build website, which was a lot of fun, a lot of headaches messing around. And I created a map, and I just found farms, and farms would come to me and say, "Can we be on your map?" And I did that. So really for sort of five years, and we were fairly quiet, to be honest. We had a number of followers on socials and stuff, but that's why I decided then, having some things happen in my life and having to take some time out with an operation, that I would actually get someone to build me a proper WordPress website, and which is the site we have today. And the center point of that is still very much our map. So we have an interactive map on there where people can go and enter their location, whether that's at home or whether they're traveling down to Cornwall for a holiday, or whatever it is. And they can search for farms near them selling food direct from their farms, and make contact with those farms, find out how to buy from them, and those sorts of things. And that's fundamentally what we're all about. And obviously a lot of messaging behind that about the benefits of buying direct from farmers as well, in terms of the quality of the food you'll enjoy, the way you can actually directly support the kind of farms you want to support, and those sort of messages.
Brilliant. Are you coming across any who are attempting to sell direct and struggling, and what would they be struggling over? I'm thinking of one. I bought a veg box, and ultimately they had a really good response, probably too good to manage, but their issue was around the delivery mechanisms. This wasn't a local farm for me, certainly. They were trying to achieve national coverage, so they've kind of had to sort of pull up the drawbridge now and rethink how they're going to do the logistics. Do you have conversations with farmers around that?
Not an awful lot. I've seen one or two go in my time who have struggled. A lot of it for us on a small scale will be simple things, sometimes like the local abattoir shuts, and so suddenly they got to go, instead of going 20 miles or to an abattoir, they've got to go 50 miles to an abattoir for a start. So meat producers suffer in that respect. You'll then get things again, if I stick with the sort of red meat producers at the moment, and you look at beef prices. If you send an animal to market or into a slaughterhouse, and you're getting £6.50 a kilo dead weight for that animal on the hoof, you're sending that animal alive. Just all you're doing is putting an animal in a trailer and taking it to an abattoir. That is, beef prices are high at the moment. And then, so when you start building in your costs, and you think, well, I'm going to sell that direct, and I'm going to take it to an abattoir, I'm going to get it butchered, I'm going to have to pack it, I'm going to have to sell it somewhere, I might have to, I'm going to have to promote it. The margins are very small, at those times. Some people, again, I think have thought, actually, is it actually worth it? So it's about building value, but it's also what it isn't. Selling direct is not something anybody should do, because they're failing in their farm business right now, and we cannot survive as we are. So we'll just sell direct. It's not an easy option. It
No.
requires it requires capital. If you've got to set up your own little farm shop, or you need refrigeration equipment, it requires a whole load of new skills. We talked earlier on about our own experiences with social media and things like that. You've got to be good at that. Marketing is not easy, and it is a competitive world. You are competing with the supermarkets, but you're also perhaps competing with other farmers. So
Yeah.
so it's kind of that's where I think sometimes it can go wrong. If a lot of people are, I think, and it's a good idea, you'll see a lot of people who will start just selling a bit direct from the farm. You may have a dairy farmer who obviously thinks they got beef calves being born. They'll put something up to say, we've got beef boxes available next month, and it's quite nice, and it goes on steady. But that whole leap to kind of becoming predominantly producer and provider is a big step.
Yeah, the infrastructure around it. I mean, there's a reason why these supermarkets have become successful, in
Yeah,
providing
yeah,
the
that's
cheapest
right.
prices.
That's right. I would say,
Yeah.
having said all that, to my mind, the biggest things that are the real positives, and are allowing what I wouldn't say we're seeing an explosion of people selling direct, but what I'm seeing, we are seeing a steady increase of more and more farmers looking to move this way. And two things to my mind are the biggest, help to that are social media and couriers. So you have people now do not need to put an advert in the local magazine or paper or the parish magazine. They can go as wide as they like through social media. They can
Yeah.
engage people in all sorts of forms of media, video content. People love to see farmers telling their story on screen and seeing the
Yeah.
farm. And then you can pop it in a courier van and you can get talk to a guy who's a goat meat producer in the north of Scotland. You can get goat meat into London overnight, straight from his farm. And that sort of thing those are great facilitators, if you like. But you still have to be good at what you do.
Yeah.
If you want to grow, you kind of got to go through these things, really. And I think there needs to be probably more training for people or opportunities to learn. And that's where, again, with Produce and Provide, with the community of farmers we have, I'm always really pleased to see how generous farmers are sharing. Somebody who's new coming in saying, I'm thinking about selling direct, what do I do about so and so? There's always a wave of responses from people saying, well, what we did was this, or we recommend this courier company. And so there's a lot of help out there for farmers. You've
Mm.
just got to open up your book and
Mm.
just ask for help.
But it's got to be, in my opinion, it's got to be constant and consistent, because the public, we're a fickle race. I caught myself the other day buying something because I wanted to make a curry, I think it was, and whatever it was, I knew it wouldn't be grown in the UK, or at least what was being sold in the shop wasn't from a UK producer. Now, I went through this process last year of thinking, okay, I'm going to dedicatedly buy British for a month. And if I couldn't get sweet potatoes grown in the UK, then I wasn't having sweet potatoes.
Yeah.
And even down to the lager, and not the lager, the cider that I like to drink was Somersby, which is a Carlsberg brand. Although it sounds very English, it's not at all.
Yeah.
And so I switched to an English one. But we all have our habits, and we all need convenience in our lives these days. We're conditioned. Somebody said to me, we're in a system. So you can't blame people for the choices that they make when the system is designed to send you there and to drive you down there.
Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest challenges for farmers, is that that other C word, convenience, is king for so many people. Busy lives, both parents working, that sort of
Yeah.
thing, and I've seen that with milk vending machines is one of the things, again, that really, I suppose, started to spark my interest in setting up something like Produce and Provide, is when I thought what a fantastic idea milk vending machines were and still are, because dairy farmers selling their milk to whichever dairy company, again, remain completely anonymous in the marketplace. But simply by having a milk vending machine where you maybe only sell a couple of 100 litres a week, you get people coming to your farm gate. You're there filling the machine up. You get to have a conversation with them, and you get them going away saying, do you know what? I spoke to the farmer. Do you know what actually happens on a dairy farm when they do this? They do. And it's a lovely, really great little way of conveying some messages out there and engaging people. So I think it's getting people then to stop and think, and not everybody is gonna ditch the system or try and break out of the system. A lot of people say they can't afford it. A lot of people will say, I'm sorry, but a bit like the milk vending machines on the weekend, it's a bit like, oh, kids, should we take our lovely glass bottles and we'll go to the milk vending machine, we'll have a milkshake. Yeah, on a Wednesday night at 6 o'clock in the pouring rain, driving home from the office, do you really want to divert 3 miles out your way when you're going right past one of the super? And that's where loyalty is kind of lost, in that people, it requires a bit of effort.
I think it's about making some deliberate choices. I've just switched to, not switched wholly. I like full fat milk. It's only me that I have to think about, so I haven't got anybody moaning about, oh, why are we having full fat milk? But I've started buying Graham's Dairy Jersey Gold milk now, because in the supermarket I thought, okay, I'm conditioned to look in the cabinets where all the green, blue and white top bottles are, but just look on that shelf above that I used to ignore because it's got milkshakes and yogurts and stuff, and look up there to see what I can find that's in real milk. That's going to be more expensive, but milk has just become such a, yeah. What do I use it for? I stick it in tea and coffee. and I make a cheese sauce now and again,
Yeah.
and or have cereal now and again. I've altered now to the Jersey Gold milk for when I really want a nice creamy, coffee or on cereal, and reduced down the bland stuff with the blue lid just to subtly change it so that I'm enjoying the milk more. Is when I actually have that, I'm deliberately choosing to have quite a rich milk, if you like, and I'm doing my bit, I suppose. That's what the driver was behind it.
You've got that. That's what the job's about, really, is trying to make people aware of what the differences are. So
Mm.
this is something that I really, when I set up my free range milk label, people just used to say, well, milk's just milk, isn't it? It's just the white stuff. It's just so and so. And I came across this guy in the Netherlands who was on social media as he what was he? He was the milk connoisseur or something, and he would be quaffing from a wine glass with this milk, saying this milk's come from this farm over there, and and I thought, this is exactly what we need. Milk, not all milk is the
It's the
same.
same.
And that's what's happened to our food generally. Beef is just beef, lamb is just lamb, whatever it is, a carrot's just a carrot. And we've got used to this, in many ways, quite a bland diet.
Milk
We can,
has literally become homogenized.
yeah,
That's
exactly. I try not to write confusing posts about that, but that's exactly where I see it. And I think
literally.
that's what. So we used to sell with the small dairies we work with, the free range milk would be an unhomogenized whole milk. And
Mhm.
I used to do a lot of shows like Great Yorkshire Show, and we would have little plastic shot glasses and just pour
Mm.
them some whole milk. And we would literally be putting out sort of 1,500, 2,000 of these little shot glasses a day, and people would come by, and you get the older people say, God, taste that, Jan. Do you remember when we went and stayed on
Milk.
that farm, and that farm?
Yeah,
Oh, blimey, you want to, and it was just an absolute revelation to them. They just
how it
couldn't
used to taste.
believe how different milk could be. And
Yeah.
it was a joy to see that. And that's again what Produce and Provide is trying to do as much as anything. It isn't just to support British farmers. There are good reasons that we want to maintain a fabric of lots and lots of small family farms around the UK, because they bring us diversity in everything,
Mm.
and diversity in flavors and choices. They're all part of that. So when you go to a guy in the northeast of England, who's got some traditional Frisian cows versus somebody in the southwest who's on a springbok calving with Jerseys, there will be differences in that milk, and they're partly, it's that French word again of terroir, which is
Mm.
kind of gives so much to our food. And
Mm.
yet we're in an ongoing process of just consolidation, homogenization,
Mm.
consolidation into a standardized product, and milk to my mind, is a great example. 98% of British households buy milk, and
Mhm.
yet most people just splash it in a sauce or in the coffee, and they think and people don't drink liquid milk, because liquid milk very often, I'm sorry, if you buy semi-skim from the supermarket, it's, who wants to drink pints of that all day long? But buy some Jersey Gold like you have. Go and buy straight from the farm, and homogenized milk that's been from the cow in less than 12 hours ago.
Mm.
And it's worth drinking. It
Mm.
really is. It's
Yeah,
fantastic. So,
absolutely. I'm not a fan of these celebrity chefs. I've never been into following any particular ones, but I do feel if there were more programs dedicated to exploring proper food, obviously we've lost home economics from the national syllabus, and there's some campaigning work going on to reintroduce those principles into the school syllabus. But if you're going to get through to the man in the street, I think it needs some voice, some profile on television that just re-educates actually where things come from, where the flavors are brought into the food and drink, and show people what to do with it. It's almost like
yes.
going back to the basics. And do you remember that I used to like to, of the celebrity chefs, I have a couple of favorites. Keith Floyd was one. But
Yeah.
the two fat ladies was another, because they were like,
Yeah.
oh, stuff and nonsense. Put a slab of butter in it.
Yeah.
None of this
Yeah. Yeah.
margarine.
Yeah.
And
And we
and I feel
we
like we
have to
need
be.
that again.
Yeah, we do. And I think butter has been a classic, really, because we have seen some of that. And and the thing about whole fat milk and fat being bad for us, and this, that, the other, now I think we've seen. I can't give you the numbers, but there's been quite a shift back to whole milk because actually, it isn't going to make you fat. It isn't, it. When we talk about, especially if you go to so when you go to a supermarket, all milk that goes into those sort of channels from the big dairies is standardized. So you'll have milk from, in that bottle, in theory, there could be milk from 1,000 different farms in that 2 litre bottle. But whole milk is standardized typically to about 3.5% fat. Now that will have come out of some cows where the fat typically in cows will run at about sort of a lot of cows about 4% fat. So there's a standardization down to about 3.5% in whole milk. So it's a tiny, tiny amount of fat. And semi-skim's about 1.7 typically. So this is another thing, and we're getting on to my favorite subject, I'm afraid now, which is milk, really, when at the end of the day. So when you go to a farmer and you buy from a vending machine all year round, you'll find in the winter when he's feeding quite a lot of long fiber food to his cows, like silage and maybe some hay, fiber is a precursor for fat in milk. So get a lot of fiber into your cows and you'll get cows producing maybe sort of 4.5% fat, a bit more than that in certain breeds. Obviously, Jerseys and things would be higher than that. And through the summer, when cows go out and eat a lot of lush green grass, it's not very fibrous, and a lot of it goes. If you let them have too much rich green stuff all at once, it comes out the back end rather quick, and so you'll get a lower fat. But I always this is a really kind of unfounded thing to say, but I think there's a bit of nature's recipe going on here, whereby in the winter we need a bit of fat. We need to get our bodies fueled up for the winter. And in the summer, we can live pretty lean, through the summer. And I think it's almost like that was created by nature in cows somehow, that, the diet would do that. Probably get a lot of knocks for saying that. But that's what we don't understand. Everything is so processed and manufactured and standardized. It's so far removed from the original product. We've lost all sense of seasonal tastes and flavors and those sorts of things. And I was sort of started doing things with a dairy company once, saying, why don't we do like autumn gold milk? This will be misty mornings and autumn leaves. You'll get hints, a bit like my milk connoisseur friend. And then you get summer silk, this kind of really light, smooth milk. And I think that it depends at the end of the day how much food matters to you, and it goes back again. Things you touched on a bit, it's household budgets, it's things like that, and people will say, this is all very lovely, but we're on a budget. Get real. I'm a single parent with 3 kids. I can't afford to do this, and I had to be really careful here because I wouldn't want to be shaming anybody. But the things you talked about just now, about a better understanding of how to cook and prepare food, cheaper joints of meat, making what you can do with a cauliflower and a few bits and pieces, to my mind, are fundamentally, what will determine the quality of people's diets, and their enjoyment of food, and also their health. We have this huge thing with the burden of diet-related illnesses on the NHS right now. And, we could do an awful lot to alleviate that if we could then help people to learn about cooking a bit. But the key word again to me comes back to convenience and time. And are you prepared to devote the time to food?
That's it. But the correlation between diet and health outcomes caused by the fact that we're not putting nutrition in, and if that's linked to the fact that people just don't know how to cook from scratch or how to make things last, if you like, I think that's it's certainly a topic for another day. At the farm I spoke to the other day, who was referencing school visits to the farm, gave me an example where on one occasion, and again, like you, they were not looking to shame people about what they didn't know and understand. That's what the whole purpose of the visit was, to educate and to help people understand, help the kids learn where their food came from. But they said that the individual, a couple of the teachers there with the kids didn't appreciate that flour came from wheat. And I was amazed at how do you get to be of an age where you're a teacher and not understand that.
Yeah.
And that sounds really snobby, and I don't mean it to, but
No.
do you know what I mean? Just I
Yeah.
feel like I don't know where I learnt that fact, but somewhere it was
It's
in the kitchen,
yeah.
watching my mum make a cake or something, and
Yes.
reading what was on the packet
Yeah. Yeah.
of flour,
Mm.
and then at school, sort of understanding more in home economics lessons. So
Yes.
yeah, I think
It's
that's and the irony last year when and we've not talked about heavy political subjects, and I don't intend to, but when you look at the disasters around the IHT changes last year, and the irony that they were suggesting that the amount of money that would be raised from that would be enough to support the NHS for what would fundamentally be one day.
yeah.
And you just sort of think, is nobody else joining up the dots here about the fact that, hang on a minute, poor health outcomes are intrinsically linked to bad inputs
Yeah.
insofar
Yeah.
as that
I
we're creating these chronic conditions from
yeah.
poor diet and lifestyle
Yeah.
for people who have few alternatives in some cases to
Yeah.
improve that because through lack of understanding or availability. Just made my
Yeah.
blood boil.
Well, I think it's probably still one of my biggest, most well-received social media posts. Was I put stuff I had to think about this. I said, I think, why are we taxing the people who produce healthy food in this country? Why are we not taxing the people who manufacture the ultra-processed foods that are
Yeah,
killing us?
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
just crazy to my mind. I think, yeah, it is. We've lost contact with our food, and it'd be wrong of me to say that we've been deliberately separated, but part of me kind of thinks that somebody somewhere once, being very cynical, once sort of decided the best way to actually make profit from food was to create a wedge between farmers and consumers. So if we can get in the middle and we can
Mm,
kind of put the consumer over there and the farmer over there, and we hold the conversation, we hold the relationship with the people who buy and eat food, then we're on a winner. And that's what
mm,
Produce and Provide is all about changing, because I do believe that he who gets to speak to the buyer, the consumer, holds the power. The producer
yeah,
may hold the product, but they don't hold the power. And by selling direct, it changes everything. You do
yeah,
hold that relationship. And I'm seeing so many people, there are people who are farmers selling direct that I've got on my website, and I see their socials, and they're kind of getting 100,000 followers on Facebook now, and they're getting, between them, they're getting nearly 500,000 on various platforms combined, and it's fantastic. That can only be good. And I'd like to think maybe, my son's 27 now, and I think maybe there is a generation where they're maybe coming. I know they're the fast food kind of generation in many ways, but there's a lot of them are starting to cook a bit now and do things like that. And it kind of only needs that to become a kind of new cool thing to do and a trendy thing to do. And we
yeah.
could see a kind of whole wave go on. One thing I didn't say about distribution of food from
Mm,
farms selling direct is that I do see a lot of people who will respond to my post saying, yes, we'd love to buy from farmers, but there are none near me and I can't get there. And so we can sort of answer that one a bit, because there are a number of farmers who will deliver nationwide
yeah,
now.
yeah,
But I also see a lot of people suggesting, well, farmers need to form co-ops. They need to deliver to food hubs. They need to have a place in the high street. They need to do this, that, and the other. And I think what people need to understand is, at the moment, of course, if you're a producer and you can sell all of the food you produce to people within a 5 mile radius, and they come to your farm and get it, that's the easiest and most profitable way to go
yeah,
forward. You've got no cost. So I think about this a lot, and I think we're starting to see some collaboration already between farmers through Produce and Provide. So somebody will have a market on their own farm, but they'll invite other local producers to come and to have a stand at that market. Or they have a shed at the farm drive where they might sell their own milk or their meat, but they'll actually sell some veg from
yeah,
a neighboring farmer too. So we're seeing that coming. But I think for Produce and Provide, what I want us to do at the moment is to get more farmers in more areas who are
yeah,
selling direct to reach more people, because there is a risk longer term going down that road of bringing farmers together and sort of shipping their stuff via a van for a distribution hub, that gap starts to open again between
We just
farmer and consumer.
recreate what we have had.
Yes, there is a danger. We suddenly have a farmer supermarket, but loads and loads of stuff there, but not a farmer in sight, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm cautious about that, and I think
Yeah.
most farmers rightly are looking to. I always say we want to celebrate diversity in terms of independent farm businesses doing their thing, offering something different to the farm, along the road. But we also want to forge collaboration. So at the moment, that collaboration for me is doing the kind of things they're doing, which is kind of working with one another to promote what they do or sell one another's products. But it's also about helping by having a kind of community of farmers on our website. It's promoting the whole concept of buying direct from farms, because still so many people don't even realize that opportunity exists,
Yeah.
and so it needs organizations like ours and others to actually get and engage these people and explain just how easy it can be to buy direct from a local, and how enjoyable. I mean, that to me is part of the whole thing, is that experience where the best thing I get in terms of comments and posts on my socials are, I found 3 farms around me thanks to your website, and I've been and seen them, and I had a lovely chat to the farmer, and I bought this, and it was amazing. I mean, that's gold, that
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Absolutely.
exactly what I'm doing this for. And so it's really important to me that whatever direction all this kind of selling direct takes going forward, if we all become producers who just stick loads of stuff in a van and ship it to London, there's a risk, that you'll be competing against other wholesalers and all that sort of thing. And the value will be lost, because fundamentally, I go back to my sort of original message about this, is that the important thing for the farmers is to realize the value in the farming behind the food. We talk so much about the product, but the value that is in the because organic's a simple one. Organic's been a bit muddled for a lot of people, and people just kind of, what the hell does organic really mean? But we are seeing an interest in growing interest in organic food, and people are there buying into the farming behind the food.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd like to see more widely. And sometimes it's a problem, because you'll have farmers, for instance, who are very traditional, very low input, and really farm along organic kind of lines, but they don't want to pay for the certification and the inspections and those sort of things. So they quietly go on. But because there isn't a stamp on it, they cannot say, people say, are you
Yes.
really organic? But
Yeah.
by allowing people to come to their farm, talk to them, see their farm, go around, and
Yeah.
talk to them about what they really do, that direct engagement helps them to overcome some of those
Yeah. I
hurdles.
might not have the stamp on the packaging, but to all intents and purposes, what you see around you, it's natural, and you can understand all
Yeah,
the input.
that's right. And it's, I think that's, and again, we see things like labeling for free range pork, and you'll see sort of outdoor bred, which means the piglets are born outside, but they're actually finished indoors. Whereas if you go to a small pork producer who has some traditional black saddleback pigs roaming around in the wood, and they've got some huts out there, that's where they live. They are truly free range. They are outdoors 365. And big business can't create that on an industrial scale, so it's really, again, that's why it's engagement, farmer to consumer, to tell the real stories about how food is produced on their farms. And,
Brilliant.
that's what we're here to do.
Where can we find you? What's the website address?
So the website is www.produceandprovide.co.uk. You'll find us on Facebook as Produce and Provide, and you'll find us on Instagram as Produce and Provide UK. I've made a brief sort of foray into TikTok, but my son, having now got a full-time job, that's sitting there a bit like a dead duck. But we'll see how we go with that. So it's and I'm always happy. I'd spend a lot of time fielding people's questions and answers. If people pick up and they've got questions about this, always happy to do what I can to explain what's really going on, sort of thing. But yeah, people, do please go to the website, have a look at our map, and if you're a farmer and you are selling direct, please register. We charge a little fee, but you get to be on our map with your full producer profile page. You can create free adverts for seasonal or new offerings. You can list on farm events for free on our website as well. So if you're holding a market or an open day, we are just here to promote. So yeah.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Neil. I love talking to you as always, and I'll speak to you soon. But thanks so much for that today. It's terrific.
Thanks for the opportunity, Beverly, and I've enjoyed sort of trawling back through my past a bit. And yes, it brings back some good memories. And yeah, nice to talk to you too.
Terrific. Have a nice day.
Cheers. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
What a treat it was for me to have a sit down with Neil. Every time I do, I learn so much. I'm enormously grateful for him taking the time. Check out his website, produceandprovide.co.uk, if you want to find producers in your area, and in doing so, you'll be doing your bit to support British farmers. Neil's specialism in dairy was particularly interesting to me, and with farm gate prices for milk hitting the headlines again, it seemed like a good time to seek out a dairy farmer who could speak from their own experience about that situation and how they're preparing for the year ahead, protecting their margins as much as they can and managing the herd whatever the weather. And so, as luck would have it, I was approached out of the blue by Sophie Gregory, dairy farmer, Nuffield scholar, fellow podcast presenter and Dairy Industry's Woman of the Year 2021. It's fair to say that Sophie is at the forefront of advocating for the sector, and I'm delighted to have her join me on Past Your Bedtime. You can hear my discussion with Sophie on next week's episode, so please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss it. That's all for today. Thank you to a growing number of people letting me know that you're listening, and to many of you offering up suggestions, as well as introductions to people across farming. Your support is much appreciated, and it keeps me doing what I do. Well, I've rambled on long enough. If it's past your bedtime, perhaps it's time to turn in. Until next time.